Howdy, I'm Chris, and I like to do things. And on today's episode of I Do Things, I did a 72 volt, 230 amp hour battery for my golf cart. I like to call it a UTV, but most people call it a golf cart. It's essentially a beefed up four-wheel drive golf cart for doing some light work. And it's got two AC motors. It sucks a lot of juice. Yeah, this thing came from the store with some car batteries and didn't last very long. They would only last about 10 miles off-road with some light work or 16 miles on-road with no light work. I needed more than that. I'd cover more miles than that in one day, so I just wanted more charge. Lithium, man, that's where it's at. If you just want to do the lithium battery upgrade, I highly recommend that. The power it gives your cart, the torque, the top end, it's 100% of the time. You push that pedal from the start of the battery to the end of the battery, it's going to give 100 effort. That's definitely the upgrade to go if you're on the fence with a golf cart or a UTV. Highly recommend at least lithium. So when looking at them, most of the manufacturers had 100 amp hour battery. That, according to my math, was only going to give me like 25 to 50 miles. I thought that'd be cool, but I just wanted a little more. I wanted to go a whole weekend, a 3-day weekend, maybe a 4-day weekend during hunting season. Doing light work, I needed more range. To have the 230 amp hour battery built that I built was going to cost like 8-10 grand. I got a couple people to quote me at that much. I wasn't ready. That's just silly money. I looked into building it myself. Went to a couple websites, a couple forums. Big shout out to DIY Solar Forum. You guys and gals were pretty educational in teaching me how this whole lithium phosphate thing works, how to make your own battery. Essentially what I did is built a power wall or a battery bank and put it in my golf cart. You just don't need lithium cells. You need a computer to monitor these lithium cells. It's called a BMS. I got a great BMS that has active balancing, and it keeps these batteries all happy and at the same state of charge, and it's the system in which you monitor your batteries. To BMS lets you know if something's going wrong, if your batteries are too high in charge or too low in charge, and just back to the build. I learned not only how to build a lithium phosphate battery, I also learned how to TIG weld aluminum, picked up some scrap metal aluminum, taught myself how to TIG weld, made a box for my battery, got everything all hooked up, bench tested it, made sure it worked good. We even stuck it on the cart and drove it around the block. You'll see pictures. It's hilarious. Sorry guys, I couldn't get this video out earlier. I lost my original footage, lost all my original video. A little discouraged. I said, I'm not gonna be able to make this. A couple people were still asking for it, and so I put together this little slideshow presentation narrated video thing for you, mostly pictures from my phone. I'll go over everything, try to cover the whole process. It was super fun to learn how to put this battery together and build it myself. I saved a lot of money. I built it for $3. It was going to cost almost 3 times that to have it built for the 230 amp hour battery. Some people will say that it's unsafe, and if you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. But if you know what you're doing and you can learn new things pretty easily, and you've got a high confidence level around electrical, I recommend giving it a try. It's a lot of money, yes, but the reward, geez, man. Like I said, 50 miles mixed use, 100 miles on road, about 40 miles of just straight work. Geez Louise, that's I can go a 4-day weekend on a single charge. It's great. Highly recommend it. Without further ado, thanks for joining me for this video. Give me some likes, maybe a follow, and whatever smash the bell means, go ahead and do that too, I guess. Right? Thanks. This is one type of lithium phosphate battery you can get. These cells are 3.2 volts each. I needed 24 to reach my 72 volts needed for my cart. Inside these prismatic cells are anodes, cathodes, and separators sandwiched and rolled up, kind of like Little Debbie Swiss cake rolls. And wrapped in an aluminum case, and also wrapped with the blue plastic shell. Lithium phosphate batteries are known to expand and contract with different states of charge. So I put this high density foam, it's 1/8 inch thick, along the outside of these cells. Some people just put the cells straight together and clamp them together to try to keep them from expanding. However, that's not very healthy. You do want to allow some room for these batteries to expand and contract. So that's why I put the foam in there, so they can expand and the foam will compress and contract, allowing the foam to expand back, so just to leave a little buffer between the cells so that they can shrink and grow. So these lithium phosphate cells don't need a lot of room to expand and contract, so I did put a little bit of compression on them. That's mostly because I had a size constraint to get these 24 cells in the aluminum box and under my seat. It's not a lot of compression, but it's just a little bit to keep them nice and tight. After compressing these cells down to reach my measurement, I used fiber reinforced glass tape to hold them together nice and tight so that they kept the measurement and wouldn't be busting through my box. This also helped me keep the cells wrangled together. I made these 8-cell banks, which there are 3 of them that fit in my box nice and tight, and this just makes sure that they're all happy living together in a big bundle and they're not flopping around. They're just nice and wrangled up inside the box. In this shot, I'm just getting a measurement to know how tall I need to make my box, and also showing the fiber reinforced tape being wrapped around and the spacing between the cells. Also, this shot here, I'm shooting a width of my box, and it's also showing the space between the cells. This is also going to allow for some heat dissipation and some airflow around the cells, which is healthy. And here in this shot, I've got my 3 banks all put together. I've got my spacing between all my cells, and I'm shooting measurements so I know how wide my box needs to be. Okay, now that I've got my banks, I'm gonna show you how I connected them and give you a little overview of the swelling thing. Not to discourage you, it's gonna happen, but I've learned most of the swelling was done at the factory during testing and before shipping and all that. So I've got my 3 banks here, and in the early times of LiPo, and when you're doing power walls, some people attach them in a straight line like this. In my application, that's not gonna be too good. Even if you compress the snot out of these things, they're gonna swell. So also in the early days of LiPo, they used very rigid bus bars on top, like 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch plate, copper, or various metals, aluminum. So when the batteries swelled up, even after compression, all the stress was on the top of those bus bars and on the terminals, causing battery failure after the terminals pried away from each other during swelling. Also, in my configuration, that's not a good idea, because if you connect all the tops like this and you try to go to connect all the tops of the bottoms, you're going to need a wire to connect a 3rd row. So you end up doing a configuration like this where you stitched the 2 battery banks together right there in purple, and the other battery banks are not stitched together. They're stitched to themselves in a long configuration. So real quickly, this would lead to a swelling situation sideways of one bank pulling away from the other. In orange would pull away from the 2 that are stitched together in purple, because the banks aren't stitched together, it's the long row of batteries. So I taped the snot out of my batteries using fiber reinforced tape or glass tape. Another thing that they make to help combat the stress of the terminals during swelling are flexible bus bars. Some of them look like this, like a rope, and they fasten to the top of the battery terminals and allow for a lot of flex. Another version looks like this, where it's a sandwich or a copper bar that has a bend in it that allows for flex in between the terminals too. So I've taped the crap out of my 3 banks, 1, 2, 3. I would have liked to have taped the whole battery pack together, 1, 2, and 3, but it was just me working on this thing, and those 3 banks together were like 150 something pounds. It was going to be too heavy for me to lift into my battery box on my cart by myself. So I just went with these 3 banks. They're stitched together. I'm hoping that the stitching together with the flexible bus bars allows any flex between the 3 banks. Even though it's stitched together, those bus bars are flexible, and it allows those 3 banks to swell independently of each other. that's the plan. We'll see how it holds up. So in this movie here, I'm going to be telling you about the BMS and the Smart Active Balancing. As I mentioned, the BMS is the computer that monitors all of your batteries, makes sure their state of charge is not too high or too low. If one battery gets too high or one battery gets too low, the BMS can shut off the pack as a whole to prevent damage to other packs or some kind of catastrophic failure. So to power the BMS, you need to plug one up to the front of your battery and one up to the last battery so that it can measure the 72 volts as a whole, and then you run all of these other little teeny tiny wires to the positive terminal of each one of your cells. This allows the BMS to monitor each cell individually to see which ones are high and which ones are low. The active balance will take a little bit of juice from the high batteries and move it over to the low, so it keeps all of the cells in the pack nice and happy and keeps them the same, keeps it topped off. You don't have to worry about balancing your batteries like in the early days of lithium battery packs, where you had to make sure that each cell was individually happy and they were all happy in the pack. That's what the BMS will keep them all happy and prevent damage to your battery. Here's a picture of what it looks like. All the spaghetti noodles run into each one of the cells, and as you can see, I've got a happy battery and a happy family. We are slapping this thing on the back of the golf cart and we are gonna go around the block. I just couldn't wait to see if it worked. I wasn't done building my box, so we put it on the back and it worked. All right, here we are looking under the seat at the stock battery configuration. I've got my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 batteries to make 72 volts. However, the winch was wired to run off of number 6 and number 6 alone at 12 volts. Yes, this buggy came with a DC to DC converter. It's located under the dash. You can see it circled here. This converter was only meant to run the 12 volt accessories that came OEM on the cart. The lights front and rear came pre-wired for a light bar if you needed it, and this took the 72 volts of the overall 6 cells and converted it into 12 volts. Of course, it doesn't have enough amps to run the winch, so that is why the winch was run off of the number 6 battery shown here. I elected to keep the OEM DC to DC converter under the dash and just wired it into my 72 volt battery to power the existing 12 volt system, and installed a yellow top deep cycle Optima battery over here in the number 6 battery position to run my winch and some high powered light bars, phone chargers, accessory chargers, and also a 12 volt to 120 volt inverter. Once I took my 4 center batteries out, these blue outlines show where the batteries were sitting, 3, 4, and 5. I took those out and I'm left with a center piece of angle. This is going to be in the way of my aluminum battery box. Also, this front piece of angle ended up being in the way too, so I cut those out. On the back piece of angle right here highlighted in green, I welded 2 tabs, 4 screws to screw the battery box down to the frame. Here is a shot of my 1/4 inch plate that I ended up using for the bottom of my pan. My battery box is going to go right here inside the stock frame rails on the left and right side. I welded the piece of plate right here underneath along those side rails. Highlighted right here in green, you can see that those tabs that I just circled are to bolt the box down on some big tabs that I welded onto the back of the box. That'll hold the back of the box onto this angle and make it part of the frame. Up here in the front, I'm highlighting 2 holes drilled in the 1/4 inch plate. Those line up with these big tabs that I welded on the front of the box to bolt the front of the box, essentially to the frame. That's what these bolting mounts do. Here again are those front mounting tabs on the box. Go around the side. The red hole and black hole are for my negative and positive 72 volt battery leads. The yellow was for my communications for the BMS. Here are the tabs on the back of the battery box again to bolt it to the frame, and that's just what my box looks like. And here we go with the installation. I've got a piece of rubber mat that I'm putting down to go between the plate and the aluminum box. Once I get my box put in, I go ahead and put the quarter 20 bolts. They're grade 8. Put them in the front and the rear to fasten my battery box to the cart while I do the battery install. Fast forward, I also have a piece of rubber mat on the bottom. I elected to go with a diamond plate to keep the batteries raised up a little bit off the bottom of the box and provide for some airflow. Here is a shot of the foam on the side of my batteries to keep the 3 packs of 8 separated, and also to highlight the amount of fiber tape that I use to keep these 3 battery banks adhered together. Dropping them in, getting them lined up. I also put the diamond plate rubber sheets on the side of these battery banks to keep them from banging in the side of the aluminum. I use some spacers at the end to pack them in really nice and tight. This rubber mat also provides some vibration dampening, and it's so the cells just aren't rubbing up on the aluminum the whole time. Here is my BMS. It's the JK BMS I told you has the active balancing. I'm going to go ahead and put that in. But before I do, I remember that this is a jigsaw puzzle that I created, and I need to run my big fat wires that attach to the batteries through the side of the battery box. I elected to go with glands and just run the batteries out as a whole instead of using battery terminal type connections. Having the wire run from inside the box and bolt to the battery terminal type connection, and then have another wire bolted on the outside, is just another electrical failure point for me. This battery is going to be permanently installed in my cart, so I had no need to make those quick on and off battery cables on the outside of the box, so I just ran them through to hardwire it into my cart. Here I am fastening the wires to my BMS. After bolting the battery cables to my BMS, I wrap them in a thick self-adhesive rubber tape that just essentially puts another piece of sheathing on the outside, and I also wrapped it with electrical tape. Here is the other side of the BMS. One side of the BMS runs to your battery negative, and the other side of your BMS ends up running outside of your box and attaching to the negative of the cart. This is where the BMS creates the automatic shutdown to separate it from the load to keep the battery pack from harming the load, or vice versa. Again, I wrap this connection with self-adhering rubber and electrical tape, made it nice and insulated. Here is a frame I made to keep the battery bank pushed to the back of the box and give the BMS a little bit of space and air to breathe. There's about 1.5 inches at the front of this box that I had to kill. Actually, I think it's about 2.5 inches that I had left over. It's for some air circulation, allows the BMS to be isolated from the rest of the battery pack. I created this frame to go in there really snug. All of the aluminum I used for this project was 1/8 of an inch. And here, while I'm banging my frame into place gently, it caused my camera mount to fail and ended up dropping the camera, so I lost some footage. All right, so here's the frame and the spacers all put in nice and neat. The battery leads are connected. So what's left is to take the bus bars that I soldered the BMS wires to that plug into the BMS for the active balancing. I get the bus bars attached. Here's what it looks like in a spaghetti mess. This was when I was doing one of the testing phases before I actually put it in the cart. And again, I made another trip around the neighborhood, thus the ratchet straps holding it in the back of my cart. Here is the actual installation on the cart. I cleaned it up a little bit, organized my wires, labeled my batteries, but this is what it looks like before I put the lid on. You can see my positive and negative fat leads to the battery just running out the side of the box there. And this is what it looks like with the lid on before I installed the Optima and the battery charger. And just like that, my battery build is over. So is this video. Stay tuned to my channel for another video detailing the whole cart build.